hence we are supposed to remember it, and we are not supposed to make any mistakes here. Okay, so we'll start with the JVP. So definitions and all, like as it is oscillating top column of vertical blood, that is the like height we are going to measure, or that is the level where you are going to take a measurement. Then IJV versus EJV, as yesterday we discussed, like right-sided internal jugular is continuous with superior vena cava and it is straight. There are no valves, there is no sympathetic activity, and like it is not prone for kinking or any bending. That's why it is more chosen, like more important, like than external jugular vein. So these are the few differences you are supposed to know. And regarding the pulsations, as I said, it is like in between the two heads of sternoclavicular, like sternocleidomastoid JVP, it is better negative pulse, it is a positive impulse, and it is a venous pulsation, arterial pulsation. You have all these differences, respiratory variations and all. So I said yesterday that here you will have one question, important one, Kussmaul sign. So you are going to get it. So this difference you are supposed to know. Measurement, as I said yesterday, like we are going to take a vertical height from here. Like here we have measurements here 1 2 3 4. Like if this is a 4 centimeter, you're going to tell JVP as 4. Better not to add this 5 centimeter. And like if you add this, some people want to tell it as, for example, this will be considered, and this will become CVP. So some people don't want like this term to be added, so preferably don't use it. Then this is the place where you are going to have the carotids, and this is the place where you are having the internal jugular. So it is lateral, this is medial, and this is the 45-degree inclination. As I said, if you get a CVS case particularly, you are supposed to ask for backrest, and you are going to make the patient lie in a 45-degree, and then you are going to examine the JVP. And yesterday I sent a video in the group, like what you are going to do, you are going to ask the patient to turn onto the left side, then you are going to put a beam of light, and then you are going to look tangentially so that the waveforms are visible clearly. You are going to look from the side, not like from the straight. Okay, that negative depressions should be better appreciated if you see from the side angle. Then I said, don't keep it 2 to 3 centimeter, keep 4 centimeter as a normal JVP, and more than 4 centimeter as elevated JVP. So we have got multiple conditions. As I said yesterday, abdominal jugular reflex. For example, this is the hand, or like this is abdomen. So you are having liver here. It is a like this is your abdomen quadrants are there. So you are going to put a periumbilical pressure area for like you are going to put it for 15 seconds. If there is persistent rise for more than 3 centimeter, or there is like even though if you release the hand after 15 seconds also there is a persistent elevation, then you are going to cause it as elevated, like hepatojugular reflex is positive. Hepatojugular reflex is positive, you are going to tell. And the pressure which you are giving here, it is going to be transmitted to the liver. Liver is also congested because of the right sided event here. So this is inferior vena cava. So when you are going to put pressure here, the venous return increases, and in turn the JVP increases here in the neck. So these are the important causes yesterday we discussed, and you have to remember, like Kussmaul sign yesterday, as I said, there is like normally JVP should decrease with like inspiration, and it is the increase of JVP with inspiration is Kussmaul sign. Yesterday we discussed mechanism, will not go again there. So you are going to like answer it. What are the different causes? Like I said, it is a constrictive pericarditis, and these are the two ventricular causes, and restrictive cardiomyopathy also sometimes acts similar to constrictive pericarditis only. So you are going to give explanations like why it can happen. Yesterday we discussed this also. And Gartner method, as I said, for example, if this is the person who is there and you are going to lift his arm like this above the level of his neck, or like above the level of his cardia. For example, if you have the cardiac chambers here, 4 chambers you have, so you're going to lift it and you're going to look for the emptying of the veins over the hands. So you're going to calculate the total height of the limb which is above the level of heart, and this one you're going to calculate it as roughly. This is called as roughly. You're going to approximate whether CVP is elevated or not. Normally, if the person is having his hand straight also, it should empty because heart is at lower level. So if there is a severe increase in the internal jugular venous pressure, then you may have prominent sublingual veins may be there. And I said if it is extending intracranially, you will look for uvula in the throat, and you are going to like person if he is like 45 degree, you are going to make him sit, then you are going to look for the JVP. If still it is inside, then you can ask him to stand also. If the patient is stable enough, you can ask him to stand, then you can look. If it is still not visible, then you are going to put torch into the oral cavity and look for the uvular pulsations. So that can tell you like JVP is extending intracranially. Then as I said, we are having waves like A, C and V are the three positive waves, and X, X dash and Y are the three negative waves. We together we take it as X wave. So we have like A, C and V are the three positive waves we have. And H wave, it is like it is seen in case of bradycardia, severe bradycardia preceding A wave, not important for your level. If you want to tell, otherwise don't utter this only. As I said, A wave, it is the most prominent wave and it is due to atrial contraction. This is the most prominent positive wave. Okay, most prominent positive wave, biggest positive wave, secondary to atrial contraction. Then we have got X descent, it is due to right atrial relaxation. Then X is like actually X is like total descent, it is interrupted by C here. So we call it as X and X dash. So this interruption is due to bulging of the tricuspid valve and also impact of the carotid. And next we are having X dash descent, it is due to continued atrial relaxation as well as pulling down of the tricuspid valve due to contraction of the RV. Then we are having the V wave. V wave is due to passive filling of the ventricle which is occurring during the closed state of the tricuspid valve. And here we are going to remember, for example, if this is the A wave, C wave, then here is the V wave, then again the A wave, C wave goes on. So this is C wave, V wave and A wave. In case of tricuspid regurgitation, because the valve is not closing here, this is going to impact like this. So what are you going to get? We are going to get A and CV wave we are going to get like this, something like a pulse wave it is going to be. So this A wave, somewhere here C, this X dash descent is not there, only here it is not happening. So we are going to get directly V wave. This is called as CV wave, or it is also called as venous corrigans. Venous corrigans, or it is also called as Lance's sign. Lance's sign. And this corrigans word is going to be confusing because you are having also called as water hammer pulse or corrigans pulse is there. So don't confuse with the arterial corrigans pulse and venous corrigans. So this is the important here. Then Y descent, as we yesterday we saw, like it is the last part, it is due to the like opening of the AV valve, and the causes for like a large A wave as well as slow Y descent, both are same. So mechanism is because the pathway involves the same pathway where the blood is going to pass. So now difference between A wave and C wave, yesterday I said like most important questions they are going to ask is how do you identify a V wave? So identification of V wave is by followed by biggest or most prominent negative wave. So biggest negative wave is like you are having the X descent following the biggest, followed by biggest negative wave, or which corresponds to your carotid pulse. So carotid pulse. So this is the answer you are going to give. How do you identify V wave? Then as I said, it is a prominent A wave. Again, we have got causes here, the same one. And absent and X descent, Y descent, yesterday we discussed all these. Like abnormalities of V wave, as I said, in tricuspid regurgitation, you have CV wave. We have got a CV wave. And abnormalities of Y descent, again, these are the same as the causes for large A wave. So this is the cause again for large A wave. So after like all this, we are going to 1 minute. So like we are going to finish with the JVP here, and next will be the proper cardiac examination. So proper cardiac examination will go with the inspection. So as we know, we are again going to follow the same four: inspection, palpation, percussion, auscultation. These two are not of much important. Like in examination, they will be like almost we can tell these three. Like whatever we feel like these three are almost like not important. Only auscultation performs the predominant aspect of like cardiovascular system examination. But this is what we actually feel. But in reality, what is there? Without coming to auscultation, you should be able to diagnose whatever valvular heart disease is there with inspection, palpation, and percussion only. So this is the expertise which you can get with the cardiovascular system. If you are able to tell it is a mitral stenosis or mitral regurgitation, or it is aortic regurgitation with inspection, palpation, and percussion, then you are like perfect with your cardiovascular examination or cardiovascular system. If you are relying still on the auscultation only, then like it can tell like a person is not that good at his subject. So like you have to be more perfect here, and you should be able to answer all the important aspects of inspection, palpation, and percussion. So coming to the definition, precordium is the anterior aspect of the overlying chest. So if this is your midline sternum and you have got ribs here and both the sides, so this area we are going to call the precordium, which is overlying the heart. So if this is your cardia, which is lying like this, so this is the area which you are going to call it as precordium, and includes the here also base of the heart. This is the base of the heart and this is the apex of the heart. So this will be the base and this will be the apex. So this region is totally precordium. So coming to the inspection, so you're going to inspect the patient in supine position. If the patient is too breathless, like he is having orthopnea or he gets P&D very shortly, like 30 minutes, 40 minutes after going to bed, then he is slightly uncomfortable, then you can make him to lie at least at 30 degrees also. That is fine. So first, what are you going to do is you're going at the foot end of the patient like this. If the patient is like this, you're going at the foot end and you're going to bend and you're going to look towards the thorax and you're going to look for the symmetry on the both the sides. So is there any bulge on only one side, especially left sided, there is a precordial bulge. You are going to inspect that. Then second one, after you go from the foot end, you are going to come to the right side of the patient, and from the right side you are going to see. So both the level of the like anterior chest level should be equal on both the sides. So if there is any bulge on the left side, so you can see there is a hump or something, like there is an elevation on the left hemithorax or over the precordial area when you are inspecting tangentially from the right side. So first one is at the foot end of the bed. Second one, patient's right side, directing a beam of light across the precordium. So most of the time what happens is beam of the light and all, if you are in a dark area or something in a closed room, you can put a torch light which travels from the right side to the left side so that any elevations can be noted. Or if the patient is on the side of the window, it's well and good, like you can directly see it, because tangentially the light is enough to make any like very obvious deformities can be made out in front of windows. So coming to the assessment of areas, so we have got a mitral area here, we have got a tricuspid area, then we have got a pulmonary area, and then we have got aortic area. So we have got two more areas here. One is called as Gibson's area, and then one more is Erb's area. Can anyone tell me what are those areas? If anybody has read, what is Gibson's area and what is Erb's area? Gibson. Gibson's, like what space it is, and what is Erb's point, like Erb's area. So which intercostal spaces they are, like where you are going to auscultate. Erb is third, okay, and Gibson's is first, okay, first intercostal space. So this is the first one here, okay. So this one is the first intercostal. So we are having here Gibson's. Then this is the second here. We are having the pulmonary. Then we are having the third one here, which is the Erb's. Then here fourth, like fifth intercostal space, we are having here on the medial aspect, we are having the like tricuspid, and here we are having aortic. So this is your 1, 2, and 3, and this side on the 2 we are having aortic. So these are the areas which are there. So 1, 2, like aortic, tricuspid, pulmonary, like aortic. Sorry, it is apical. Sorry, I wrote wrong. It is the apical area, or it is mitral. So mitral area, tricuspid area, and pulmonary area and aortic area are the 4 basic areas. And after that, you have got Erb's and Gibson's. So you are going to auscultate for the primary areas first, and then you are going to, like if you feel any other pathologies are there, or you're suspecting something like PDA is there or like something, then only you are going to look for Gibson's area, and other areas you are going to look for. So coming to the inspection, shape of the chest, you are looking for the muscular thorax. What is Poland syndrome? Anybody knows? What is POLAND? POLAND, Poland syndrome. Okay, amastia and absent pectoralis major is correct. So if there is a absent pectoralis major on one side, you are going to like have a like atrophied or like a small hemithorax, you are going to feel it. There may be absent of breast also may be there. So inequality of the chest. So what happens is, for example, if there is a like right sided absent pectoralis major and all are there, then you may feel it as normal hemithorax on the left side also, like bulging precordium. That may be abnormality which you can feel like. So you're going to see that. Broad chest and shield chest, you are going to see it in Turner syndrome. And pectus carinatum and excavatum are congenital abnormality associated with Marfan syndrome, rickets, you are going to get. Harrison-Sulca is your pediatrics again. Along the line of the diaphragm attachment, there is a pulling and there is a small groove like which is formed. That is due to soft ribs which are due to deficient calcification which is occurring. And you're having straight back syndrome. So I'll show you the straight back syndrome. So this is the normal chest which is there, and you're having a pigeon chest. It is also called pectus carinatum. So if there is a bird, like you are having a pigeon is there, so like it will be having a shield, like chest will be something like a this person what he is having. So that is pectus carinatum. So you are having a pectus excavatum here. So it is something like excavated. So you also have it as like cobbler chest. So what is there? What is cobbler is like the shoe polish, like shoemakers and all, who they have a device where they make the chappals or shoes, and that will be compressing over the level of his sternum. So due to chronic pressure, it will be there. Then Harrison-Sulca, I think they have put the wrong image. Actually, it should be like, it's not the one. It is same only, pectus excavatum. Here you are going to have a groove-like thing, which is indrawing of the chest will be like over the ribs. You are going to have an indentation. That is Harrison-Sulca. This is the wrong image actually. And coming to straight back syndrome, see here we have got something called as, this is lordosis and this is lordosis. So we are having two lordosis normally, and we are having two kyphosis here. So like kyphotic curves are there. So sacrum, and like this is sacrum, this is thorax, this is cervical, and this is lumbar. So this is the normally, it is like normal anatomy of the spine. So if this kyphotic things is lost and it becomes straight, this is called as straight back syndrome. We don't want to go like what is straight back syndrome and all, so it is like not for like your level. So straight back syndrome, what are the parts of that syndrome, what are the abnormalities? The only thing you should remember is when you auscultate, it will mimic ASD. That much is enough. So straight back syndrome can mimic ASD. This much is enough. Breast abnormalities are there, like as we said, like that day we have got gynecomastia. Again we have that day we have discussed the mnemonics. We have got that female and the disco, we had put a mnemonic, and all these drugs are there. In that, cardiac drugs are like digitalis, and we have got one more is spironolactone. So spironolactone is used as a diuretic. Okay, so we are having these two drugs which are of cardiovascular importance. So if the patient has gynecomastia, you should look for presence of digitalis and spironolactone. Klinefelter syndrome may be associated with congenital abnormalities, and female hypomastia, like it could be associated with mitral valve prolapse syndrome, widely spaced nipples, and shield chest. That day we discussed in the GPE. If we have a shield chest, then it could be part of Turner syndrome. Distended vessels and veins, that is a part of IVC or SVC obstructions. So like here only we will draw 1 minute. So this is again your part of your abdomen examination. Also they will be asking you like about distended veins and all, like how it is and what it is. So as we all know, like if this is the abdomen which is there, so we have umbilicus here, and like normally it is radiating all the way like outward from the umbilicus. It is normal also. If it is exaggerated, we are going to call it as caput medusae something. See, for example, if there is a like here is the inferior vena cava, okay, and inside here like liver is there here, and there is the inferior vena cava, and if it is obstructed, so there is a collateral flow which is going to like establish, and from down like this the blood is going to flow upwards, and they are going to anastomose here with your azygous vein and your axillary epigastric veins, and also over the pectoral veins and all. Then it is going to enter the heart through your like superior vena cava. So like this is the like normally it is going to happen. If there is a superior vena cava obstruction, then what is there? The blood is going to flow down till down here. Then it is going to ascend through your inferior vena cava. So you should be able to answer like what is the direction of the flow of the blood, and like what are the different patterns of venous flow you are going to observe around the umbilicus here. So you are going to answer it. And one more thing is here radially away from the umbilicus, above the umbilicus it goes upwards, and below the umbilicus goes downwards. Even in case of portal hypertension, this is exaggerated only, but there is a no breaking of rule like the downward one will go upward. It is not like that. But only in case of vena caval obstruction, you are going to break that rule like below the umbilicus and above the umbilicus. examination of the precordium will continue, like precordial prominence, bulging of intercostal spaces, anything. See, for example, if you were looking from the right side here, you would have noticed a bulge like this. So inspection first part. So if you had noticed like this, then there was a, if you had looked tangentially, then you could have noticed a bulge over this part of the, like over the precordial area, you could have appreciated a prominent bulge. So you can either do it by standing in front of the like patient, like if he is in the window side, or you have to put a beam of light with that you are going to observe. And prominent bulging of the intercostal spaces usually over the precordial area is usually due to it is due to pericardial effusions. Usually you are going to see. If it is at other places like somewhere here or somewhere farther here, it could be due to empyema. It could be due to empyema. So precordial prominences like involving both the intercostal spaces and ribs are there. Then like it is only bulging of the intercostal spaces. If there is along with the intercostal spaces as well as ribs, it is due to chronic abnormality. Like if there could be a pathology which has started in the very young in the age, then it could be like causing bulging of both ribs as well as intercostal spaces. And next is like apical impulse. Before we go for this apical impulse, first we'll go for the definition. Normal apical impulse is defined as it is the, for example, if we do this as the cardia and we're going lowermost, outermost point of maximum cardiac impulse in the early systole, which is going to impart a perpendicular thrust to the palpating finger, which is very gentle, and then followed by medial retraction in the late systole, like it is going to retract like this, and the late systole, which is better seen than felt. I think if you want, you can skip this finger, this part. If you want, you can skip if it is very difficult for you people to remember. So this will form the complete definition, but this is not always mandatory. So apical impulse, if you want to tell, otherwise no. So it is a outermost and lowermost prominent cardiac impulse, which is giving a gentle thrust, perpendicular thrust to the palpating finger, which denotes the cardiac systole. So this is what you are going to put the definition as, followed by slight medial retraction in the late systole, which is better seen on inspection rather than a palpatory finding. So impulse location impulse, you are going to describe it like location, duration, size, or size like it is the area you are going to tell under what area, like how much it is extending, then force or amplitude, and contour. Like we do not use this much, but we can like tell like what is the, like we can put a graph like and we can describe how it is and all. So coming to apical impulse, it is normally it is located at the so if you are taking like this, for example, if you take this as your sternum, so this is your second, then this is your third, then this is your fourth, and if this is your fifth. Okay, so is second, third, fourth, and fifth. So if your cardia is something like this, it is situated. So you are going to have it at, this is the mid clavicular line. So it is at or slightly medial to mid clavicular line, and it is extending only in one intercostal space only, and it is around 10 centimeters from the midline of the sternum. 10 centimeters from the midline of the, like if this is the midline, so 10 centimeters from here, and it is on the just at or just medial to mid clavicular line and the fifth intercostal space. And like that only 2 to 2.5 centimeter diameter, it almost forms the one intercostal space only, confined to one intercostal space, and lasts for more than 50%. This will discuss 50%. We have hyperdynamic and like heaving type of apical impulse, which can change, but normally it should last less than 50% only. So coming to your normal apical impulse, it is produced by LV systole, and this rotation and all we will leave it off. And what is there is this one is like more of a theoretical, we'll leave it. And shifted apical impulses we'll discuss next. We have, so what are the things we are going to do? For example, if this is at the fifth intercostal space here, we are going to look what are the causes for upward displacements, and what are the causes for outward and upward, out and up, and then third one is what are the causes for lateral displacement only, then what are the causes for lateral and downward, then what are the causes for only downward displacement. Okay, these are the different causes we have. So the up, out and up, then sideways or laterally, and lateral and down and downwards. So we'll come next, like one by one we are going to see them. So what is the RV apical impulse? What happens is sometimes In cases of right-sided pathology, when it is too much, the RV will like hypertrophy and enlarge, and it is going to occupy the most of the part of the anterior precordium, and it is going to push the tip of the LV, that is apex, slightly backwards. So that is going to cause your RV apical impulse. So greatly enlarged RV may occupy the usual apex area, literally pushing the LV posterolaterally. That is, it is going to push the left ventricle backside. So at that time, what happens is, for example, if you are drawing the normal chambers like this, so it will be like this. So this will be your LV, and this will be your RV. It will be something like, it will be, actually it is like RA, which is like here, this will be the formation of RA, and we are having here RV will be slightly backside here, and we are having LV, LA in the backside here. So whenever this side pathology is going to increase, so you are going to push it like this. So this is going to occupy, and LV is going backside. So whatever the changes which are occurring now, that will be like, this will be your RV, and this will be your RA, and LV will be again backside here, and LA is again here backside. So you are going to, RV is formed by the apex. So that is called RV apex. So this is the most favorite question. Every time they ask this, every exam they are going to ask, and people always like tell 3 causes or maximum 4 causes. This is not acceptable by most examiners. They'll become unhappy. They want 3 serious causes and like 3 to 4 non-serious causes. That is the expectation they usually have. So that's why at least have a good amount of like at least memory based, because most of the people they answer just 3 to 4. Like 5th, 6th, they don't know only. So at least try to tell 3 serious causes or like 4 serious causes and 3 to 4 non-serious causes. So we'll come next slide. A double apical impulse is like, so what happens is, in case of HOCM, what is there? Sometimes there is a like asynchrony is there between the LV contraction here. So because of HOCM, asymmetrical thickening will be there, and this is the SAM. Sorry, I wrote wrong here. So this side is the asymmetrical thickening which is occurring, and this is the mitral valve which is there. And sometimes what happens is this asymmetrical thickening will be so big that you will be able to feel this one as one impulse, and this one will be as one more impulse. So you can have double apical impulse in HOCM. In case of LV aneurysm, what happens is there is a small bulge like which has occurred over the apex. So apex is contraction 1, and this also slightly contraction. You can feel it as double apical impulse. So you can have double apical. HOCM sometimes they give example for even triple apical impulse also. But it's very rare to have triple. Double is more common. Next is the lateral displacement. See, we are going to look for the displacement of the apical impulse. So if any skeletal deformity is there, for example, if the person is like, this is the person and here is your cardia. If the person has excavatum like this, so the cardia will be shifted more towards the left side. Or any intrathoracic pathology is there. For example, if this is the thorax now and this is the cardia, like here you are having a what you are telling, fibrosis or collapse is there. This is going to pull it like this, or there is a massive edema like fluid or air accumulation like pneumothorax or massive hydropneumothorax or even massive pleural effusion, that is going to shift, and apical impulse is like it is here, it is going to be pushed laterally. And like what happens is volume overload, and you have got a pressure overload conditions you have. So in case of what happens, like we have got eccentric and concentric hypertrophies are there. So in case of eccentric LVH, what happens is like this, you are going to have eccentrically hypertrophied, and that is going to be causing your shifting of apical impulse on left side. So it is going to move laterally. So in case of eccentric LVH, I think they have given put it wrongly here. So this should be actually constant, like no, I think yes, eccentric LVH, that is correct. In case of concentric LVH, it is due to aortic stenosis. It will be like concentric stenosis. Eccentric is due to MR and AR. And in case of right ventricular hypertrophy also, like RV will be like coming here and encroaching. That's why, so you are going to like, sometimes it may push even the LV. So that can also cause pushing or lateral displacement of the apical impulse. So downward displacement of apical impulse, for example, if this is the mediastinum and we have got aorta which is going like this. So if there is a large aneurysm or large tumor which is occurring there, which does not have space, it can push the mediastinum downward, and it can cause even apical impulse also to be pushed slightly downward. Upward displacement, as if like if uterus is there here which is expanding, so that may push up the diaphragm as well as push up the LV apical impulse, like pregnancy. And in case of children, usually the abdomen will be like huge, that's why sometimes it may be pushed up. And if there is rapid fluid accumulation here, that will also push up the diaphragm, or like pregnancy or tumor, both are like same. So that may cause like pushing up of the diaphragm and pushing up of the apical impulse. Then right-sided apical impulse, like before you comment on this, you better don't tell so many people like causes of absent apical impulse. Like they will be telling one of them they put the first answer as right-sided heart or dextrocardia. That they will put as the answer. So better that right-sided heart or dextrocardia. Don't give it as your first line options. Okay. So right-sided apical impulse is in dextrocardia, or there is a massive pleural effusion which is pushing like this, or it is a pulling like that. So right-sided, this one you give it as last option. Again, they go on like asking you what is dextrocardia, what is right-sided heart, what are the auscultatory findings, how do you differentiate, then what are the specific abnormalities in ECG. They may ask you suddenly, a question may come like any congenital causes for dextrocardia, what is Cartagena syndrome, then what is situs inversus totalis, partialis, and all. So some questions may go here and there. So use this word cautiously, dextrocardia, right-sided hearts. Okay. We will just discuss here only what are the causes of like absent causes for CVS and like non-CVS causes for absent apical impulse. Can anyone tell like what are the CVS causes for absent apical impulse? Can type 3 here and 3 there at least. First, CVS causes absent apical impulse. Okay, first one is effusion. Next, CP. Okay. Then, no, it is non-cardiac, obesity. Okay, we'll write here obesity. Next, here one more. Rib. Okay. See here only, no, but many of them are not able to answer like 3 causes here, 3 causes here. No, that is the last answer to be given, dead patient. So like if anybody answers as a dead patient, I'll tell what the examiner or how the exam goes is, for example, you will tell, sir, apical impulse not palpable. The next question comes is he alive? Are you able to assess whether the patient is having life or not? Then they will tell what are the signs of death, how do you assess the death of the patient, whether the patient is like, so for example, they'll tell your apical impulse is not palpable, then you'll tell, okay, we have given a dead patient for you in examination, so you're going to auscultate for the dead patient. So you're telling there is a S1 present and S2 present, so you're telling apical impulse is absent, so your patient is dead, so you're able to auscultate something in a dead patient. So this is how they start making, like taking you here and there, they will make a fun of it. So never answer dead patient as answer at all. Okay. Tamponade is one of them. I am expecting one answer which they are not giving here. In case of CVS, one more answer very important. That is MI involving the apex of the LV. So there is an anterior myocardial infarction involving the apex. There is a loss of contraction. Here we have emphysema. Fine. Then here still more. Pleural effusion is there. Then we have got what is that? Pneumothoraxes are there. Then anything else? Anything more causes? Non-CVS causes? One more is there. It is due to sometimes fibrosis. So due to fibrosis involving the lung pathologies, the mediastinum like pleura can also be pericardium can also be trapped, and that can like sometimes pull it backwards. Like pericardium sac is only pulled backwards, so that time you may sometimes not feel it. So this can also be a cause. And there are different methods of like palpation of apical impulse. I don't know whether they have put it in this slide or not. Wait, we'll see. No, they have not put it. So we'll discuss here only. So what is the method of palpation of apical impulse? I don't know like how many people have read it in how many different ways and all. So as far as I remember, in case of GK PAL or like something physiology, what we have read, which is usually not given in medicine clinical manuals, they don't give it. So whatever we had read is first actually you have to, this is a precordium. First you are going to keep the hand and you are going to palpate where is the like impulse is there. Then you are going to put your ulnar border and then you are going to put the one finger over the maximum impulse. This is what some physiology books we have read actually. But whatever the medicine books directly give is visualize the apical impulse wherever it is, or directly put your fingers over the intercostal space or the fifth intercostal space 4, 5, 6 somewhere, or the mid clavicular line, and just go and directly palpate with the tip of the fingers. Our medicine books usually fail to give this method, like put a palm, then put ulnar border, then like this. So if they ask how are you going to palpate apical impulse, you can tell like with the tip of the fingers directly. I think that answer will be sufficient. No need to give the method and all, like how are you going to put your hand, finger and all. And if it is not palpable in the supine position, sometimes you may need to slightly turn the patient to the left lateral position for a better palpability. So that time you can just ask him to slightly turn over to the left side, not completely like 90 degree, some 30-40 degree you can ask him to turn, and then you can palpate. Next is extent of apical impulse. Like if you it is extending more than one intercostal space, or it is like more than 3 centimeter, then you are going to call it as diffuse apical impulse. It can be due to LV aneurysm. For example, if this is the apex which is normally there, and because of aneurysm which has been formed, so like it was a one intercostal space here which you were able to palpate, and now because of aneurysm you are going to palpate like normal, as well as aneurysm has also involved in this like this. So you're going to palpate it is more than, so here one intercostal space, here one intercostal space. So you're going to palpate in more than 2 intercostal spaces, like one intercostal space, you will call it as diffuse apical impulse. And sometimes in a very thin individuals also, like thin individuals and narrowly spaced ribs are there, you can get it in 2 intercostal spaces also you can get. Or as I said, retraction of lung due to fibrosis or collapse, like last time, like absent apical impulse. So fibrosis of lung or collapse may actually alter the position of the precordium, like pericardium. So it can pull the cardia up, down, inside, out.